Well, let me tell you, the greatest danger in learning about pastoral counseling from a chart, the temptation will be that you are going to reduce this art of pastoral counseling to a chart. The basic strategy I'm sketching is not meant to be a precise formula in which you just follow a chart by any means for how to move into somebody's life. I am offering this really as a loose guide to you um, as you enter into somebody's soul with a desire to see that their appetites for Christ become their ruling passion. And all we get from a chart or the material and all of the thinking that we're doing now is meant to be nothing more than that, an opportunity for the Spirit of Christ to move through your intelligent movements into somebody else's life. Remember, the very first point that I made long ago was, as we began the pastoral counseling, that it was not a technique to master, but that it was a relationship to offer. So, what I want to encourage you to do as we come to this lecture is I want you to maybe put your note-taking pencils and pens down for a moment, and I want you to sit back in your chair with a mood of not thinking, hey, I've got it all together, but with a mood of thinking that says, let me ponder what is being said. Let me become aware of what is stirring within my soul, within me, rather than getting the teaching right so that you can go out into the world and do this. Let me ask you to relax and listen, become a different type of person in that listening. As you ponder what I say, if you ponder the thoughts you're having about how to move into somebody's life, can you be a different person? So far, we have covered a lot of ground. We have talked about the presenting problem, and we have suggested that the very first thing that you must do with the presenting problem is not to think, how can I fix it? And what should I say? And what should I do? But just to think vision. And when you think vision, it creates a space within your soul for the Spirit of God to speak. And as you think vision and as you become attentive to the Holy Spirit speaking within you, then secondly, to become curious. I talked last time about becoming very curious, about wanting to know all that is involved in the presenting problem in a person's life, and just asking many respectful questions with the energy not of judgment or of analysis, but with the energy of just plain curiosity, plain respect. And then as the presenting problem gets talked about, I suggested that you want to reframe the problem into the story of a person's soul, to encourage people to begin talking about their relationships, because that is what the story of life is all about. Excuse me there, I yawned. If we are relational beings, if we are beings made in the image of God, then the story of our soul is really the story of the relationships that we have. And so as you reframe the question, put a new picture frame around it, and you get the person you're doing counseling with to start talking about the story of their soul. And as a person begins to talk about their relationships, their present relationships, excuse me, I'm yawning again, um, relationships with their husbands or wives or children or friends or their past relationships, particularly of their parents, of course, because that's where we have spoken of before of their early formation occurring. Maybe the relationship, the present and immediate relationship between you and them right there in the counseling room at that given moment, that immediacy, as you are chatting with them, and their deepest relationship you want to know about is the relationship with God. As they begin to work through all of that and to reframe their problem in terms of its impact and influence by all of those different relationships. As I begin talking about that, now the work of pastoral counseling really begins. Now you listen, and you listen with the intent of knowing and exploring and discovering and then moving and touching their soul. In order to do that well, you've got to be thinking beneath the waterline, right? So let us start talking about that. Let us start talking about the ways in which the pastor or counselor can think about the difficulties as somebody shares the problem. Way down deep under the waterline, the root problem, the flesh dynamics. This category is not something that I'm encouraging you to understand in a way that you can pin a label on somebody and figure somebody else out. But it is a way of sitting back and with the guidance of the Holy Spirit to open to the Spirit's leading as you think about what this person could become if they grew deeper into trust of who God is for them, deeper in terms of surrender and moving together with the flow of the Spirit of God. It's a way of thinking about what's going on in the deepest part of their soul, in the part that is a mess, and the part that is just full of the flesh, and the part that reflects the image bearing fallenness, not their image bearing redemption. What is going on? As you start to think about the root cause, what really is behind their presenting problem? Excuse me, I'm doing a lot of yawning today. What I want to suggest to you at this point is that pastoral counseling and many other points as well, but at this particular point, that pastoral counseling parts company dramatically with secular psychotherapy. We're going to be talking about the root problem, not in terms of thinking about a damaged psyche or the damaged self, which is the way that a psychotherapist might do that. That's how they often think about what's going on. Somebody is hurting and they were damaged by a bad event, and the therapist has to come up with a understanding of that and a work to repair that in some way. And we're not going to be talking about what it means to be a damaged self. Oh, excuse me, the yawning is contagious. I wonder if I'm making you yawn. No, no, no. We're not going to be talking about thinking about what it means to be a damaged self. That's psychotherapy, which I believe for you at this level is an illegitimate thing for you to be engaging in. What we're going to be talking about is rather about pastoral counseling, which focuses on a stubborn soul as opposed to a damaged self. The stubborn soul with incredible potential, but it still has a problem with stubbornness that's there. I want to explain, I want to make that as clear as I can to you. In secular therapy, the assumption is made in all of secular psychology that there's an assumption that I believe is at the exact variance with the biblical worldview. And that assumption is this, that the little baby that is born, that now at the age of 2 or 3 or 4 begins to experience the harshness of the world, of a parent who rejects him, or a parent who loses their temper, of an alcoholic parent who beats them, of a perverted parent who is involved in sexual abuse. And this little child begins to experience all of the good things as well as all of the bad things that I've just said. And the assumption is made that that child can best be understood as an innocent self, and as an innocent self with no moral direction that is bad whatsoever. All they are wanting to do at this little cute stage of being a little cute boy or a little cute girl, what all they want to do is to come alive with who they are as a cute little boy or a cute little girl. But their environment hens them in. Their environment keeps them from becoming all that they can be. So we think more in terms of these innocent self that has now been damaged by a difficult environment, and we want to bring repair to that. Just as a physician who would want to treat a person who has been damaged by an assailant who plunged a knife into their arm, the surgeon says, well, you are an innocent victim, and my job is to suture up your arm and repair your muscle and fix your bones. The secular therapist thinks in a very similar way. We have an innocent self that has been damaged, and my job is to restore the fullness of the self so that you are released to be all that you can be. That's the view of secular psychotherapy. Now, I want to contrast that with a very different understanding that I believe is at the root of pastoral counseling. Pastoral counseling, from a Christian perspective, assumes that there is no such thing as an innocent self, and that that's a theological statement, that every child born into this world except for Jesus has been born with a fatal disease, a moral disease, affected by the fall. Every child born into this world is an image bearer, and that gives the child his or her dignity and value. But an image bearer having a depraved, sinful soul. Now we have the concept of dignity and depravity. We have this little child who is now the adult sitting in front of you in your relationship with them in terms of pastoral counseling, and you're thinking about this person not as an innocent self who's been damaged and you've got to fix something by going beneath the surface and seeing where the damage is, but you are thinking now in terms of this person as a stubborn soul who is looking at the realities of life and finding some way to keep themselves intact, to keep themselves preserved, feeling good about themselves, somewhat happy, whole, able to function, to take care of themselves and face a difficult world. And they are taking responsibility for that. And what they are saying is, God, you, God, are not relevant to this process whatsoever. It's my job to take care of myself, and this is how I'm going to do it. And that very statement is depravity. They do not see, here's the sin, they do not see God as someone to be trusted. Well, let me tell you, some little 5-year-old girl who's in the middle of sexual abuse naturally says, "Is God is with me." It does happen, but why? Maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe that's what I want to say. It could happen, but often it does not happen. Why does not it happen? Why doesn't she make that connection? Besides being underage and not really self-aware, fundamentally it's because that little girl has no relationship with God. She has been cut off from God from her own sin, her own depravity that is hers from birth, the original sin. And that's something in her is saying, whatever is happening in my life, I have got to handle it on my own. Because there is nobody out there for me. Look at what's happening to me. And there's nobody out here for me. There's nobody taking care of me. God has been cut off from her life, from his life, from all of their lives. And let me give you a simple definition of what the Bible calls the flesh. And I am talking about as the flesh as the root problem beneath all of our presenting issues. The Bible talks about no longer living in the energy of the flesh and mortify the flesh. Do not do violence to the flesh. Kill the flesh. Pretty strong words. What the Bible is talking about, what is the Bible talking about here? It's not talking about my skin. The flesh can be defined most simply as the determination to make my life work without ever trusting God. That's the flesh. The flesh can be most simply defined as a determination to make my life work, even as a 7-year-old boy with an alcoholic father, or as a 10-year-old girl with a neighbor who seduces her. I am going to find some way to make my life work. That hurt a lot. I don't like what happened to me. It was wrong. I am the victim. It should not have happened. There has been damage done to me, of course. But my core determination is, am I going to find some way to make my life work? Yes, I am. And it is not going to include God. So when a father neglects his son, or when a little girl is abused, the essential point that I am making here is that there is no such thing as an innocent self. a self that's not been damaged, that has been damaged. It has been damaged. But there is an image bearer. There is a cute little girl that is being treated very wickedly and despicably in a way that she should never be treated. And her pain is very real. And her pain is very legitimate. And our mood in working with her should be one of profound empathy and rescuing her from that awful situation, if that is at all possible. And all that, of course, is true. But I want you to go beyond that, to recognizing that in each of us who has been harmed by relational events in our worlds that have not been as they should be, in each of us there is something, there is an energy within us that reflects our fallenness and says, I am going to make a determined attempt. I am going to be determined in my effort to find a way to make my life work. And it is not going to include trusting God. The world is not working for me. I am going to find resources within myself to get my needs met, which I myself can control. So while things are badly happening to me, my response to those bad things comes from that stubborn flesh dynamics. I will rely on me. I will find my resources, and that doesn't include God. Now recall the concepts from an earlier lesson when we were talking about self-need, where we said, I am the point. My needs are the point. And self-management, I am going to make my life work for me. That's the issue. Those issues are present even if I am the victim or even if I'm the perpetrator. They're issues that are there for all of us. Those are the issues that are beneath all of these presenting problems in every single person that you meet. We all have it in our world. This is a fallen world. Therefore, we can put it simply this way, that life experiences, whether it is a wonderful mom or dad, or a bad mom and dad, or somewhere in between, life experiences times or multiplied by fleshly energy equal flesh dynamics. Fleshly energy, what is that? The determination to make my life work without God. So my experiences multiplied by my determination to make things work without God equals flesh dynamics. In other words, the strategies that I come up with to make my life work so that if God does not come through, I am just fine. I do not really need him because I am intact without him. Do you see? What is the person saying? In the way they're behaving, in the way that their psychology is working, and how their theology is meeting the road. The rubber meets the road. What they're saying is that I don't need God, and that is sin. And sometimes we work with people that, oh, they're church attending and Bible study reading, Bible study going, and doing all of the religious, classical Christian disciplines and all of that. And you say, well, they're not saying that life is working without God. They're really chasing God. As a counselor, I want you to look deep within. Look at the presenting problem that they are bringing to you. Can you see evidence? Not in the things that they do, in all these activities that may be church related, but do you see evidence that in the moment of their presenting problem that they are full of trust, or are they full of self, trying to get their needs met with their own power? I want to illustrate that personally for just a moment. If we are going to understand flesh dynamics, if we are going to realize that we are up against a problem that we cannot solve, that this is the spirit of God's fight, if we are going to realize that the problem that we are up against is so big and so bad and so deep and so awful that nothing has the power to deal with it except the gospel of Jesus, If we're going to realize that pastoral counseling depends on what Jesus does in our lives, it is not something that we pull off. No. If we are going to realize how big and bad the flesh dynamics are, then maybe it will be helpful to put some illustration to the concepts that I'm talking about. Right now, as I talk to you, I'm a 50-year-old man who has two parents, but one of my parents has died. My dad died when he was 59, and my mother is in her middle 70s now. But she has diabetes, and often her body is not working well. But before my parents died, you see, my father died, my parents went through a divorce after they'd been married for some 25 years. And my father was very, very lonely. And he began to do some things, changing jobs, changing where he was living. He was very lonely. And it was a normal struggle for him, of course, for them, obviously. And my mom, she went and got remarried quite quickly. Within 2 years, she was married again. And it is a struggle for me to be okay, even though this has been 20 years since. I tell you, if you wanted to provide pastoral counseling for me, when my father has now died and my mother is remarried, and I'm not always happy with my mother because of her choices. You see, she is the one who sought a divorce. If you want to provide pastoral counseling for me, if you want to move into my life as a man who is struggling, and this is a very present struggle that I am in the middle of experiencing, then even as I share it with you, suppose you were to ask some questions out of curiosity, out of respectful, loving curiosity to me. And you might say, well, Dan, tell me more about your mom and your dad, and tell me what kind of struggles you have now based on who they were and what you were going through. And I would want to share things along this line. I would say to you that I am very grateful to both my parents. They took me to church. They taught me about God. They were very active in the church. And I can enumerate all the blessings that we had a uh, very upper middle class, lifestyle, even though my parents didn't have a degree. They had good, solid, steady jobs. Um, I could tell you about how they were active in my sporting events and the activities in life. I could tell you about the fights and arguments that they had in their marriage, and knockdown, drag out fights, and how numerous times my father would pack up a suitcase and leave and go and spend a week with some people from the church who would provide him soul care and some counsel. I could tell you all of these things, and yet everybody can say, and yet, right? Because nobody has perfect parents. Nobody has is perfect except for God. And if in our flesh we turn to some source other than God, we are always going to experience profound soul smothering disappointments. We are going to realize that those other sources are not going to do it for us. What I would say is, my father's died and I don't have a father, and I would like to have a man in my life, even as a 50-year-old, who was fatherly to me, maybe somebody in their late 70s or 80s that I could look to as I would look to my dad, who was still alive, and look at my mom, and maybe I could forgive her. What I would say to you is that my mother is a woman who is kind of matter of fact, affectionate, but she's got a quick wit and a sharp mind and a really good brain, and she can be critical at times. And I just recently, as I walked away from visiting her in one of the rooms that we were talking in, she had a moment and she turned and she looked at me, and She said, "I'm very proud of you for all that you've done in your life." And she gave me a hug. That just happened not so long ago, and it's the very first time that she ever made a point of telling me that she was proud of all that I had done, because most of the time what I would get from her is criticism of how hard it is, the things I was trying, and that I'd always followed tackled the hard things, from my degrees to my military service, or whatever it might be. She's like, "You're always doing the hard things," but she never said she was proud of me. Hmm. I wonder what that did to me as she looked me in the eye and stood up and said that she was proud. You see, I am a damaged self, but am I more a damaged self, or am I more a stubborn soul? There it is. There it is. I have to look inside to see. I am really a needy person. I have to take care of myself, don't I? What has been done to me, the criticisms, the loss of a parent, and what has been done to me? Who is there to care for me? Well, that's just a thumbnail sketch. Obviously, very brief. I've not told you much about my life, but my relational story of my soul is trying, and either losing relationships like that with my father who died, or being told that I'm taking on tasks and I have goals and a trajectory that's too hard, too lofty. What is it like for me, you say? How will you care for my soul? How will you move into my life? What are the flesh dynamics that are going on as I keep some relational distance from my own mother? Am I a stubborn soul who longs for more affection and strength in somebody else's life and their way that they relate to me, which I think is legitimate to want? But then, do I see that as a need in myself that you, the therapist, had better take care of? And then, in my self-managing ways, I go about looking for people who are going to fix me and respond to me in ways that I want them to, in ways that maybe my mother or my father had not responded to me. Is that the way that you would begin to understand me? Would that be something that's on your mind? Because that is more of who I am, more of a stubborn soul than a damaged self, a soul who needs to trust something other than me, rather than who needs sympathy for my damaged self. As you listen to someone talk about their life, as you listen to someone share about their life, maybe for you with you for the first time, they kissed by their mother? Did they have a father with all of his good points who still had a certain neediness that called something out of me to maybe try to take care of them, that I do not think is holy because they're so needy and they're so dependent? You see, as you listen to the story of someone's life, how do you begin thinking about who they are and what they're presenting to you? You have this category in your mind, and you're thinking, I want you to be thinking, flesh dynamics. How are they trying to sort out their life apart from relational reliance and trust upon God? And you realize, yes, there is something ugly and wicked and bad each side of each one of us. And we have to use terms like that. Many years ago, I asked the question, whatever happened to sin? People don't want to talk about sin, evil. Why do we not want to use that as a diagnostic category, if you will, in our minds as we begin to think about problems? You see, we're so wanting in today's society to call everything good, but that's not what Scripture says. Is there not something fundamentally morally wrong with us? If we are Christians, then we must say yes. This is our original sin. It is stubbornness that goes our own way, doesn't press into trusting another, namely God. And then as you think like that and encourage me to tell my story, and encourage your friends to tell their story, what kind of categories do you have to reflect upon the story as you're listening to the story? How do you categorize? How do you see and understand it? And I want to suggest this very simply. There is so much to this that we will look at much later, but for now, I want you to think about the notion that there are some basic categories that I have already started or stated that I want to review with you very simply. And those are these: people tell their story. As they tell the story, think about the fact that you are listening to an image bearer. Oh, marred and maybe not even renewed, but an image bearer nonetheless. And you're listening to an image bearer of Christ, of God, tell his or to tell her story. And if you're listening to a person who longs for a relationship that only God himself can provide, and therefore every other relationship in their life, even the best husband and the best wife and the best kids and the best mom and the best dad and the best co-workers and boss, every other relationship at some point, even the best ones, is disappointing. And as you tell me your story, I want you to reflect on that. You are disappointed. You are hurting. You are an image bearer who is not receiving what you were designed to receive from other people. And maybe you are not as aware of receiving it from God as you could be. You are an image bearer who longs for certain things. That is a category of reflection. Image bearer. That's one category. The second category of reflection is a category of fallenness, fallen into sin. Is going my own way. As I listen to you tell your story, I need to realize that you are a demanding person. There is something in you which is demanding that other people come through for you, and that you feel justified in making those demands. There is something insufferable about you, just like there is something insufferable about me. We both stand in desperate need of God's forgiving grace. And as I listen to you tell your story, I realize that there is something very self-centered about your story and about you. You are demanding. And that is neither good nor changeable. I'm aware of that if I listen to the story. A third category of that we might put in our minds as we listen to the story is this. We're going to look at in exciting details later on. And this category is the category of the new covenant. It's the category of the gospel. We are image bearers who long, yes. We are fallen people who demand, yes. But we are redeemed people still. We are people redeemed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And what that means is not only that we are forgiven for all of the ugliness, but that we are actually changed. We are changed from the inside out. God has put a new heart in me. He has removed my heart of stone and give me a heart of flesh. And that is a very different flesh than the flesh dynamics I was talking about earlier in this lecture. But God has given me a new heart. And now, as I am providing you with pastoral counseling, and you tell me your story of the soul, and as I listen to you talk, I am looking for the good stuff. I'm looking for the movement of the good stuff beneath the bad. I'm looking for the thirst in your soul, and I might have to look hard as we talk. I'm looking for the thirst in your soul, the appetite that is there within you, that is directed towards God, because it is there. It's not just a demand that you have A mother who is more affectionate and less critical. It's not just a demand that you have a father who maybe didn't die and is there for you. In certain ways, but now you realize, of course, you want that. But you have an appetite for God that is far deeper than even those appetites, which may be good, but are always secondary. When your appetite for God is recognized and realized and it becomes lived out, then those other appetites cease to be demands. They only become painful desires that really do not destroy you at all. You see, the new covenant, the gospel changes us in ways that lets me think about you when you tell the story of your soul with a great deal of hope. And I need to reflect on that. I need to listen to you carefully according to categories of these reflections, right? Image bearer, fallenness. What is the third one that I've been talking about? New covenant. I'm thinking of these categories. And then maybe as I do that, as I reflect on these and I'm able to make sense of what's going on in our conversation, maybe I will be able to, as the two of us chat for a while, maybe we will be able to collaborate together and be able to come up to a clear understanding of what is the battle going on inside of your soul. Maybe as we can move from reflecting on the story of the soul to entering the battle that's going on inside of you. And what is the real battle that is happening inside of you? It is the real battle between the flesh and the spirit. Will you solve it yourself and take control, or will you relinquish control and surrender and move in the direction of the Spirit of God? Could I begin to understand what is your unique battle? Your unique battle. Oh, these categories help me to understand the battle of everybody, but I want to know your deep battle. As I talk to you, could I begin to understand what your unique battle is and leave aside the aloof sounding theological terms and flesh and spirit and bring it down to where you are living right now when you get mad and the toilet overflows? What is the battle of the flesh and the spirit at the point of that trivial inconvenience? What is the battle between my flesh and my spirit as I think about a mother who is full of criticism and rarely says how proud she is at all of the accomplishments in my life? What is the battle going on? Do not feel sorry for me. Do not give me sympathy. No, no. Explore me and then discover me and understand the battle that is going on in my soul, and realize that as you begin to explore that battle, as I begin to explore that battle with you, as you begin to explore that battle with someone else, we have a power. There is a power within us. When it is released from my heart, can actually engage in this battle productively. We can join forces with the right side, with the side that has got to eventually win, which needs to win now and a little bit more as well. There's a power within me that as you share your story and I reflect, and this battle gets defined, and I begin to see how you are demanding that your wife respond to you in this way or that, and you are feeling very insecure because of your background, and I realize that all of those are your fleshly dynamics there. But you have an appetite for God as a renewed image bearer because of the new covenant, because of the gospel. You have an appetite for God that is within you that really would love to bless your wife in the name of God, even when she lets you down. That is actually inside of you. And maybe my power that could be released from my heart into your heart includes at least two elements. One, how badly I hate your flesh dynamics, just like I hate my own flesh dynamics. It is something that deserves to die. You do not kill unless you hate. And there is a hatred that is legitimate. It's a hatred of sin. It's a hatred of the fact that when I move towards my wife, sometimes I feel so justified in moving away from her and not being kind to her because she let me down. That that part of me that does that, that part is worthy of my hate. And maybe if that hatred within me towards my flesh dynamics, as well as my hatred of your flesh dynamics, is felt by you, not as angry judgment, but as a way of saying that that is a part of you that is ruining your potential to live for God and to enjoy Him. Maybe then that hatred coming out of me for your fleshly part of you will help you to abandon that fleshly part a little bit, provided that something else also comes out of me. And that's the second part, right? Do I just love your spirit? Do I just love? Am I excited about? Am I passionate about what Jesus Christ has done inside of you? Can I see it? Even if it's a little blossom that's beginning to bud, can I see it? And do I love it? And do I want to draw it out? Have I discovered, have I come through that conversation? Have I come to know and to explore? And am I now discovering something of Christ that is alive within you? Oh, how would you talk to me? If you were releasing your heart towards me, I think that you might say something like this. You know, you really are pretty demanding at times. You demand that you be enough for the people. You demand that you be sufficient to remove other people's neediness. And I think it is because you finally want to get a break and want to take a rest. And I think that I would say, yeah, that is kind of what I do, I guess. That is not so good, is it? And your response would actually be no. Not so good. That's perhaps quite ugly. And I don't like it, and it hurts my friendship with you, actually. And I think that something in me would agree. But then suppose that you were going to go on, and you were going to go on, and you were going to say, but I know that there is, if you're talking to me, you're the counselor and I'm the counselee, you say, but I know that there is a life within you that deeply cares for your mother, cares for your father, even though he's lost, about your wife, a life that deeply wants to be a blessing to them. You might say, Dan, I can see it in you. And I just got all excited about seeing that, noticing it for a moment, and I celebrate that, and I jump up and down and I see that, and that is marvelous. I'm so thrilled to have you as my friend. I'm really glad to have you as my friend. You see the movement there. What would have happened if you were to do that? If you talk to me in that way, if you release your spirit-led heart, if you release your curious heart that has a vision for who I could become, if you release that part of you that is energized by the love of Christ and not a desire to help me and to fix me and to make me better and to psychoanalyze me, but if you release all of the good stuff that is in you towards me in a way, something about my flesh would feel much, much less attractive to me. I would chase it less. And something about the life of Christ that you are articulating and seeing within me and drawing out would start to come alive more. And I would find it more attractive and I would want to move towards that. It is already there because of the Spirit of Christ within me. You cannot put it there, but maybe you can start to fan the flame, invigorating that. And then you are living out of what the writer to the Hebrews in chapter 10, verse 24 says, you have thought hard about how you can stimulate me to love and good deeds, you see, where the Spirit becomes more alive in me because of the way that you have interacted with me. You fan the flame. And if you did that for me, you would be a man or you would be a woman who provided me with pastoral counseling. And I would be grateful and I would be a different person because of the power of God through you in my life. So that's where we're going to end this lecture. We need to clearly grasp the problem that each of us has more deeply. We need to grasp that we are image bearers who are marred and scarred because of sin, original sin, that we are stubborn and that we want to go our own way. There's the flesh dynamic. We need to grasp the gospel of Jesus Christ, what it has introduced into our lives, and that the change is that it has made, and how we can capitalize and utilize all of the resources and all the provisions that are already ours in the good news of the gospel. And we're going to keep talking about that for the next couple of lectures. And then I long that as we begin to see all of that, that we'll see how pastoral counseling can can be very different from grabbing a Bible verse and hitting somebody over the side of the head with it. Pastoral counseling is indeed a ministry of influence and fanning the flame of the work that the Spirit of God is already doing inside of another person. So you think about that and move to review this lecture with the lecture review quiz, and I'll see you soon in the next lecture. Bye for now.